Hello and welcome to Kiss My Arts. My name is Mary Blake and I am here in the Hive today. This podcast has been sponsored by the Dock Arts Centre in Carrick and Shannon. We're very grateful to them for their support. Today I have a very interesting guest. I have Colette Langan in the room, and Colette is a stained glass artist who lives here in Carrick and Shannon. So you're very welcome, Colette.
Thanks very much, Mary. Glad to be here.
What brought you to Carrick and Shannon and the area?
My parents, they're from Boyle, so I always came here on holiday when I was a child. So I was very familiar with Carrick and Boyle area. So I'm not, some people think I'm English because of my accent, but I very much identify as being Irish and being local as well. I've been a Leitrim Roscommon woman.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. And you lived always in Ireland?
My parents were in London, like so many people did in the 60s. And they had me and my four sisters in London. So I was 13 when we moved to Carrick.
Most of your life?
Yeah, most of my life.
Yeah, very good. So your work is in stained glass. I was wondering, when did you first notice, even as a child, when were you first aware of stained glass?
I have a couple of different memories. One very clear memory was I was in St Mary's Church, and I was quite old. I was in my teens, I suppose. And I was just looking at the glass, and I was really fascinated by how did the glass fit there. I could see no frames. I just couldn't understand why. And it was that, trying to answer that question, trying to find out what the reason, how the stained glass sat there. I think that was the reason that propelled me to find out, because I had the option of doing a few classes. I went back to London after school, and I wanted to do something evening and meet people. And there was a choice of ceramics, photography, and stained glass. So I went for stained glass because I wanted to know what that answer was. So
it had been in the back of your mind, because I suppose we all grew up with stained glass very present in churches, especially, I suppose, here in Ireland. I even remember my friend, we were down at school, probably Holy Communion thing or something, and her nudging me and saying, "Look." And I remember just looking, and it was like I saw it for the first time. Before that, I think we took it for granted it was part of the bricks and mortar of the church, but really then to see it in a particularly beautiful light or something, and you see it all over again for the first time. So it is so stunning that it's there for all of us to really enjoy.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes I find that the best part about stained glass is on a summer's day or on a sunny day is when you actually see the reflection on the floor or the wall or something, the colours drifting across the room, and I always find that really amazing. Which I think that was my very first memory, was when I was in school in London as a child. We were really lucky. We had a great school, and we did all kinds of experiments. My teacher, Mrs. Ellis, brought a prism into the classroom, so that was probably my first time. That's a very clear memory too, but it wasn't stained glass, but it was light and the rainbow moving around the room, and that being able to manipulate light like that and bounce it around the room, and with mirrors and so on, it was that was probably stuck with me also very much.
Because it's kind of mesmerising, really, to see it, and it moves. And I suppose every day it's different, and every time of day
it is.
It's different.
Yeah, it is. And through the year as well.
Yeah. So you studied stained glass, or you studied art?
Well, I studied art, but that was much later. I was extremely lucky because I went off to my stained glass class in Hampstead Institute. It was just an evening course, and I really loved doing it. And the lady who was teaching me, I said to her, "I really like doing this. I think I want to do this for a living." And she said, "Oh, that's wonderful. It's so wonderful that you found your career so early on in your life." So that it was just in my mind that's what I wanted to do, because at that point I was working in bookmakers, and just so far away from stained glass. But there was a glass shop and the bus to the glass shop was really rare. I mean, it only came once every a couple of hours or something like that. And I never saw it, and there was no such thing as timetables back then, so you never knew when it would arrive or not. So I was intending to go to Wembley, but the bus came along, and I thought, I know, I'll go up to the glass shop while the bus is just there, and I haven't had to wait for it. And when I was there was just a little handwritten note saying that someone was required for a studio, no experience necessary, but preferred. So I went and I got the job. And because I was such a novice and I didn't know anything about stained glass or anybody in art or anything like that, I had no idea that I was actually applying to one of the top studios in the country. And
so that was an opportunity that really fell on your lap at that time.
Totally,
So
I had no clue.
The planets were aligned.
Yeah, I had no clue who I was working for at all. But I got reminded many times after that when I used to be looking for a pay rise, we were constantly told, no, you're not getting a pay rise. The amount of people that we have that want to come here and work for free. So.
Well, that was fantastic. So you spent some time working for that
I worked
company.
for 7 years. I trained there, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like the kind of work that really has to be learnt on the hoof like that. I mean,
yeah. It was. There was no other way for it. I was extremely privileged, and it's only really my bosses kept on saying, "Oh, you're so lucky. You don't know how lucky you are." And it's only now starting to understand. Yeah, they were right. I had no idea, because the access that we had was amazing. The buildings that I worked in the Tower of London, and like the St John's Chapel was shut off for us to work. There was just two of us working there, installing the windows, stained glass windows that were.
So that is with an installation of new windows, was it, or was it
No,
restoration?
The company did all kinds, but I specialised in medieval. The conservation of medieval glass is what I specialised in. So the work that I worked on would have been, I think the earliest was from 1144 up to the Victorian times. And
the responsibility of looking after something from 1194.
1144. Yes, there was a Canterbury Cathedral. They always say that they've got the oldest glass in England, but we know, the ones of us that work there know that that's not correct, because their glass is from about 1170 something. So that's the amazing thing about it in England. There's some really beautiful little churches that have the most stunning glass, and they have absolutely nobody going into them, and they have got no idea what they have. They're just these beautiful little country churches.
And when you are restoring or conserving, what term do we use?
Conserving. Really, yeah.
Glass of that age. How does damage affect that? Is it the elements, or is it?
It's that, and also it's. My boss always used to say it sows the seed of its own destruction, because it's made from sand, and when you work with glass that's as old as that, it starts to revert back to sand. And the funny thing is that certain colours would stay in much better condition than others. So that would be to do with the composition of the glass and what metals are in it. So the blues would last really, really well, but then, say, more flesh colours or with red or whatever, they would deteriorate quite badly. Yeah.
And would it be the glass itself that would deteriorate, or would it be the
Oh
leading?
No, the lead. Well, the lead deteriorates way quicker. So the lead would have been probably re-leaded maybe every 100, 150 years or something like that. So the glass would always have been re-leaded over that period of time. But the glass itself is what we would.
And does it thin out? Is it?
Yeah, it can do.
Okay.
Yeah, it would do. Sometimes it would thin out. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what is the process in restoring that then?
The process would be to take a rubbing, which is key, and that's like the plan for your window, and so because it's like a map really. So you have all the lead lines. So when you're restoring it, or when you're re-leading it, which was my speciality really, you'd keep the new lead exactly where the old lead was. And then, of course, there would be, previously, the glass, when it was being repaired, the leads would have been used to go through the glass, but we'd glue them There'd be specialist glues that were reversible, like in line with conservation techniques. And then so that would shrink the area. So then it's quite skilled in making up areas of glass without looking like you've made up areas, or without disrupting the image in any way, and also keeping to conservation guidelines where you're not tampering with the glass or messing with it. So it was quite skilled.
So you were not trying to improve it, you're trying to make it look exactly as it was. You know, it's just honouring what the original piece was supposed to be.
As much as possible. And also it is important to be honest about the work you're doing. So supposing a new piece did have to be put in, then it would have to be signed and dated so that it would be obvious
that it was repaired.
That it was when it came from.
Very good. And you have worked on Harry Clark.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, which is a great honour.
Yeah.
Where could we see Harry Clark here in Ireland? Harry Clark windows.
He has windows in nearly every county, I think.
Has he any here in Leitrim?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Right.
But there's quite a lot in Mayo and Galway. I know that, and I know Kerry, and he has work all over. Yeah.
But the restoration process is the same. Whoever the original artist is,
yeah,
is it?
It is.
So
it is.
It's the same process and the same work you have to go through.
Yeah.
And I saw on your Facebook page, you climbing up big high ladders, having to restore. What is that? Is that replacing?
That was just a straightforward cleaning.
Okay.
The parish of I think St Patrick's in Drumshanbo, they've been shut, and they just opened the other day. And they've done an absolutely magnificent restoration job on the church. Oh no, it's not a restoration job on the church, but it's a renovation job. It's absolutely beautiful. And
so you had needed you to come in
to
and clean the windows. So that is a tough job too, I'm sure.
You need to be pretty fit.
And you
need to have a good head for heights.
I was going to say a good head for heights.
Yeah.
I was looking at you there, bravely taking a selfie of yourself up high, and I was getting a nosebleed looking at it. But
that wouldn't be very high for what
really?
Working on cathedrals and what they're like skyscraper high. Really, it's incredible how high they are.
And you have to just get up there with
the scaffolding is actually way easier than a ladder.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And the before and after, would the layman recognise the before and after, or is that just for the good health and well-being of the glass, or is it visually?
Both. No, it's both. It was apparent. It can. Yeah. It can be quite apparent how dirty some of the windows are,
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's just like all windows get dirty, I guess.
Yeah, they do. And especially certain areas where there would be candles nearby, there could be, some of those windows are a lot of soot on them.
I see.
So it was quite noticeable when they were cleaned. Yeah.
So that's a big job. What would you recommend if we had to go visit and look at any stained glass here in Leitrim? What's worth seeing?
I'm quite amazed by the quality of glass that are really in all our churches. Now, some people that might be a bit of like stained glass snobs might look down on it, because there was quite a production line of studios in England and in Germany, and they produced work for the Catholic Church, which was sent out all over the world. So they were a little bit generic insofar as the subjects were very similar, but the craftsmanship and the work in them was absolutely stunning, and there's absolutely beautiful work in it, and beautiful glass as well that they used. So I would say that nearly every parish would have at least one or two of those windows.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about something maybe a bit more specialised, there's An Tíre Glynna, which they were an Irish arts and crafts movement, and they're very much into promoting art, during the time of the Rising and around then. So they have some windows in Ardcarn parish, and I was recently up in Letterkenny. They have a number of windows up in Letterkenny. They actually have windows all over the country as well. Yeah. Galway, and they're just like the more local ones that I know of.
Yes. And how does the technique? How would the technique have changed from medieval times?
It very, very little. The only real difference, I think, probably would be glass cutters. Back then, they would have used hot tongs, and I'm just baffled. I just don't know how on earth they would use hot tongs to cut glass. I must have an experiment of it sometime. Have a go and see how do they manage that. So now, I mean, I use an oil wheel or oil cutter, and it always, I teach children, and they're always amazed, like how a glass cutter it's no knife or no edge on it at all. You can run it across your finger, no problem. It doesn't cut you or anything in any way. So I don't really.
Can cut glass.
It cuts glass. I don't really understand the science of it at all, but it's still. I suppose it's good to still be surprised by something like that.
Absolutely. But very little has changed. And what about how do you colour glass?
The glass is bought coloured usually. The only aspect really of colouring glass is from silver stain, which gives the name to stained glass, and that's painted on and fired in.
So silver stains, that is a technique that is used. So you receive you use the glass and you paint on
the stain,
the silver stain.
Yeah, and that gives it varies, but generally kind of a yellow or amber colour. There's a lot of technique and a lot of manipulation that goes into glass. So there's a lot of painting, so that like a piece of glass when it arrives, it's just a plain piece of glass, but then there would be a painting, say like a face, like if you're thinking about a church window, so the face would be painted on, and there'll be layers of tone and to give different, just to make it more painterly. So each time it's fired in. So the process of glass painting is actually great because you can just wipe it off. If you don't like what you've done, you just wipe it off, start again, and then when you're happy with what you've done, fire it in.
Yes.
And then then that piece, you're happy with that, and you can mess around again. And
so it's going. Very forgiving in that way.
That way, but when you're actually applying the paint itself, it's not at all forgiving because it just tends to kind of powder. So if you have to work with it while it's still wet. And once it's dried, it'll just clump. If you try and put wet paint on dry, powdery paint, it'll just clump up and make a mess. Mm-hmm. So you have to work quite quickly. But you can just keep on redoing it over and over until you're satisfied.
And I notice, back to the churches, I noticed that more modern churches often have quite a modern looking stained glass.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's the colour is different or the actual pieces are different in it, or the patterns. Do you think that it is important to stay true to the building or stay true to the traditional art form?
Because of my conservation, I would think, to me, it's very important to stay true to the building. But on the other hand, I also think it's good to push forward as well. And I wouldn't be a believer in keeping everything exactly the same. But I do think that it's very important that the integrity of the building is respected. But what you're talking about there, Mary, is possibly fused glass. So that's quite a different technique, and that is a very modern technique.
Okay, and what is fused?
And that fused glass, that is where lead is pretty much done away with, and glass is melted, coloured glass is melted on top of clear glass. Okay. So that technique is used a lot in Longford Cathedral, and it's the only place I can really think of locally where that's been used.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know. You also do work for private homes.
I do.
So if I was getting a new front door and I wanted an insert there, how do we go about that? That's up to the person. I like them to maybe have an idea of what they want. Sometimes we can get there through finding out what they don't want. That sometimes can be easier. Yeah. But I think these days, with so many great resources online, Pinterest is absolutely brilliant. I always send people to Pinterest to look for ideas because there's just so much there. And so maybe to have an idea of what someone you like, really. And then you work with the person and do a
Yeah.
bespoke.
Yeah,
so
it is.
that's a one-off
It is,
piece of art
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
going to have. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
and so front doors, I guess. Where else would people use it in the home?
Absolutely everywhere. Quite often bathrooms. I get asked to do something for bathrooms. You know, for the privacy. It's great for providing privacy, but it's also a piece of art as well. So that it's, it takes away that kind of maybe slightly prison look of some of those that kind of glass that's very heavy, and you can't see through.
So it can be used, and sometimes people use them on kitchen cabinets or anything.
Yeah, they do.
Or,
It's particularly good in, say, dividing areas up where you still want to get some light through. Yeah. But you want some privacy. Yeah. So that's used in the home a lot.
So it covers that, a bit of privacy.
Yeah.
It's a piece of art, and it also doesn't block off your light.
And it's the only form of art that is really quite architectural too, and actually part of the building as well. So it can be really a great way of incorporating art into your home without using up wall space, Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant. So people can contact you there. I notice your website is very interesting and shows such beautiful and diverse work. I mean, and even some children's stained glass. I suppose we think of, because most of us have seen stained glass in churches and cathedrals, we kind of think of it as a very adult kind of an art form, quite serious.
It is.
But I notice that you have some children's stuff there, and
I
some
absolutely love working with kids.
Fun imagery too.
Yeah, that's true, and it's quite funny. There's people think of stained glass as being very serious, but I think they forget that people are people, and people, they always want to laugh, and So there's some great pictures of old stained glass of people fighting, and I put up a post of I found an image of someone feeding somebody on a stick through severe contagious sickness or something like that. Oh my God,
so we can relate at this time.
Absolutely. So there is nothing that we haven't been, that we're going through now that people haven't already been through, and made stained glass about it as well.
And they were making stained glass, so it was representing something that was happening in society.
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
Too, as were the cave.
Yeah, it is.
Pictures and everything.
Yeah, I've come across it being referred to as being the first form of propaganda.
Really?
Because, well, if you think about back in medieval times, where the people were not image saturated like they are today. I mean, there was no printing press, and there were no just images were not available like they are now. There was paintings, I suppose. They would have been for the wealthy. So that would have been the place where the regular or normal person would come, and they would see the images of the stained glass. So that would be the point of them, would be about teaching the biblical stories to the faithful. And I imagine, like, to walk into a cathedral or a church, it must have been really quite a trippy experience. You think they didn't have phones or televisions or any of those things. It's quite something.
Yeah. It was quite entertaining and beautiful to watch.
It would have been.
Absolutely. I see. You did say you went back to college as an adult.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
When was that?
That was in 2012, I think it was. I wanted to study fine art. I suppose I had a little bit of a hang up in a way, because I was trained restorer, and I knew a lot about stained glass and about making it and putting it together and the technical side of things, but I always thought my art side was a bit lacking, so I decided to do fine art.
Well done. And where did you do that?
I did that in Sligo.
And how did you find that?
Challenging.
Yeah, going back as an adult is, because you were a mom, you had your family as well, so it was busy, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was. It was great, though. I discovered an ability to paint that I didn't know I had, which I just love oil painting. I don't really do very much of it, but I do really love painting. And there was a lot of things that I learned that were really useful, especially the digital side of things, and also learning how to write. That was really useful thing. I think that, I suppose I was maybe a bit disappointed that there was so much academic work in it. I thought that I'd get to do a lot more hands-on work than I did.
Yeah.
But that's really stood to me, being able to write.
And do you think it has changed your practice in the way you work? Are you still the same stained glass artist as you were before that?
Well, I think both really. I think I'm still the same, but I think it's certainly deepened my understanding of other artists and research, and I really had a hang up that it was so important to do original work, whereas that's not a worry for me anymore. And I realised that it's only by doing that you can start becoming original, or maybe you can, maybe you can't, and not to get hung up about it. I think that's so important, that just by just doing it and being inspired by other people and not being worried that you're copying them, it doesn't matter.
Yes, because you're honing your own craft. Yeah,
and by the time you filter, well, I find that by the time I filtered something, but sometimes I did recently try and copy a piece of work by Harry Clark, but by the time I had done it, it'd gone through my own filter, so it didn't really look, well, it did look a bit like his work, but not really.
It was your interpretation.
It's my
really.
Exactly. It's my interpretation.
Brilliant.
So so that was really, really useful in looking at different artists, and especially looking at other artists that aren't in my field as well. That was really valuable, because there's people doing all kinds of great art in all different kinds of fields, and so it's opening up to that, and performing arts and music, and it's not just sticking to visual arts either. You know.
Because there is a lot. Is there an opportunity for collaborative work in your field?
Absolutely, yeah, I think so. So if there's anyone that wishes to collaborate, get in touch. I'd love to. Currently, it's more like friends that I've been collaborating with, or children as well, which I work with children quite a lot. I absolutely love working with kids, because it's.
I see that on your website, that you do workshops in school. Well, I know COVID now has probably affected the availability of schools to take in an artist like yourself. But, tell me about that work that you do.
I turn up with a box of glass, really. Well, we get because it has to be in, the school curriculum has to be considered as well. I can't just go off randomly. So we tie it all up. And it's great, because I work through Crafted, who are part of the Arts Council. So they have a really good programme. So they teach the teacher and the artist how to get the project off the ground. And so we meet for an hour. But I've done it for so many years now, I kind of know the process. Yes. And I just use that process whenever I work with children or teachers. So we decide usually what's the theme. But, I mean, it's very broad. The national school curriculum is great. So they can put anything they want. Usually it's something they've discovered in school or been discussing, something like that. So, I mean, we did cityscapes, local rural areas, all kinds of different.
Brilliant. And would this be a piece that they would then have displayed and inserted into their school?
Yeah, they would. Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of different things. I did a sculpture with one class. They were being very adventurous. And that was really rewarding, because the teacher there, she said to me, she had one little boy, he was in 5th class, and she said that they were talking about doing passion projects and what's their passion, and he was saying, she said she could never engage him in anything, and he was saying, I don't have a passion, I don't know. But then after we did the class, he told her that he had found his passion. Wow. So that was, those kind of things are really important.
That's and so rewarding for you to hear that.
Absolutely, hugely rewarding. And I really feel that children do not get enough art in school at all. I just feel, if it was me, well, I was so lucky when I was at school in London in the 70s. I just only ever remember doing art, and I only remember learning through art. So I think that's probably why I, stuck with it, because I think that children sitting down at desks at the age of 5, 6, I think it's ridiculous.
I know.
I really
tough on them.
I think so. Yeah. I really do. And when I arrived in Ireland at the age of 13, I was able to keep up, you know, and I never had to sit down and go through that torture of homework in the evening or any of that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, so it's good for their development in so many ways, not just for their skill as an artist. It helps develop a critical eye as well.
Absolutely, curiosity, which I think is absolutely crucial, because I mean, it's curiosity and it's been able to challenge people's ideas, and I think that's a lot of the problems that we're seeing at the moment. There isn't enough critical thinking. There's too much believing posts on Facebook and so on.
I know.
And I really would urge everyone to always encourage children to ask questions and try and answer them if they can, or encourage them to go to whoever can answer that for them.
Yes. And speaking of Facebook, your Facebook page has shown some really interesting time lapses of your work. They're really quite fascinating.
Oh, that was the most ridiculous thing ever. I have this fancy camera and I was fighting with it, and it has taken thousands of pictures, and it's crashing my computer. And it was only a few weeks ago, and I thought, I really must see now. I must try and see if I can get an app for my phone. My phone's so much easier to take pictures with. And I discovered that my phone actually has a time-lapse button in it. And I had my phone for 3 years.
It was there all the time.
It was there all the time. And it was just so easy. And all I do, so I was just like, I'm going to be torturing people now.
They're brilliant. And they're so interesting and it's very generous of you, I think, to show us that process, you know, because it's something that we would never really experience otherwise.
Yeah,
so it's really lovely to see.
I think that's so important about, I think that's the great thing about modern times. Some people think good old times, and I think that in the past people were very precious about things and they want to keep things secret, and I don't think that benefits anyone. I think that sharing, because it elevates everybody, you know.
I know. And it's in all art forms as well, because it was Fionnuala Maxwell, the traditional singer, who said tradition doesn't have to be about worshipping the ashes, it can be about fanning the flames.
Absolutely.
So what is the point in saying we had this beautiful thing, but because we all guarded it so jealously, it's gone?
Yes.
If you love it, you want it to keep going after your time.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely, yeah. And also it brings about room for development and improvement.
Yes.
You know, so
and let people improve on your
Absolutely.
work. You know,
why wouldn't you? And, exactly.
And you also now, I see, are making jewellery and smaller pieces and sun catchers and
that was more to do with COVID really, and wanting to make things that were low cost, and also it's also about developing classes as well. I really miss contact with people really. You know, I'm sitting in my studio a lot on my own, so it's about so that the main thing about the jewellery and the sun catchers, things like that, that's all about developing so that I can make classes to teach people to make those, and I want them to come into my studio and leave either that day or the following day with a piece of their own work.
Okay,
so that's pretty much what that's all about.
So that's where that came from. That's brilliant. Where is your studio, Colette?
It's in Carrick on Main Street.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So if people need to get in contact with you, you're Colette Langan .com. Use your website. Your Facebook page really is worth having a look at, because Colette shows a lot of her work and the process is there, and it's very interesting to see that. So that's Colette Langan Stained Glass Artist is her page there. So I'd really recommend that you have a look at that. So best of luck to you with your very interesting work, Colette. It was really nice of you to come in and talk to us today at Leitrim Daily. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Very good luck with your project.